The chamber stretched for miles, a perfect sphere of polished crystal that floated in the void between stars. Inside, representatives from 300 civilizations sat in their designated sections, their forms ranging from clouds of sentient gas to beings made of living stone. At the center, suspended in midair, High Arbiter Velmora spread her wings. The avian leader's feathers shimmered with bioluminescent patterns as she called the emergency session to order. Commander Ji-hoon Kim stood in the human section, his dress uniform crisp and decorated with medals that meant nothing to anyone in this room. Next to him, Ambassador Minji Park adjusted her translator device, her face calm despite the tension in the air. They had been summoned without explanation, pulled from a diplomatic dinner to attend this emergency meeting. Around them, the chamber buzzed with concerned whispers in 1,000 different languages. Velmora's voice cut through the noise, amplified by technology that translated her words into every language simultaneously. The Vrin Empire has broken the Treaty of Galactic Peace. As of 6 standard hours ago, they have invaded 14 frontier worlds. 200 million beings are already dead. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted, demanded action, beat appendages against their seats. Ji-hoon had read about the Vrin in his briefings. They were a militaristic species that had been quiet for a century, building their strength in the dark reaches of space. Now they had struck, and the galaxy was unprepared. Velmora raised a wing for silence. Under Article 7 of the treaty, we invoke the conscription protocol. The selection algorithm has identified 3 species to provide military forces for the defense of the frontier. A holographic display materialized above the chamber floor, showing 3 names in glowing script. The first was the Kresh, a species of 8-foot-tall warriors who lived for battle. Their section of the chamber roared with approval, already eager for war. The second was the Mindari, telepathic beings who could coordinate fleets with thought alone. They accepted with solemn nods, their crystalline bodies pulsing with determination. Then the third name appeared, and the chamber fell silent. Earth. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the laughter started. It began in the back sections and spread like wildfire through the assembly. Delegates pointed at the human section, their various forms shaking with amusement. Some banged on their seats. Others made sounds that translators struggled to interpret, but were clearly mocking. Ji-hoon felt his jaw tighten. Minji touched his arm gently, her expression unchanged. A delegate from the Torvin Confederation stood, his forearms gesturing dramatically. This is absurd. Earth has been a council member for only 50 years. They are primitives who barely escaped destroying themselves with nuclear weapons. They have 3 small colony worlds and a defense fleet of outdated vessels. This must be an error in the algorithm. More voices joined in agreement. The Kresh warchief stood, his scarred face twisted in disgust. We fight alongside children? The humans spent most of their history killing each other over invisible lines on their planet. They know nothing of real war. Velmora tried to restore order, but the mockery continued. Species after species to protest or ridicule the selection. Some questioned the algorithm's programming. Others suggested that humans should be excused from service and a 4th species selected instead. A few more cruel suggested that sending humans to war would at least solve the problem of their presence on the council. Through it all, Minji and Ji-hoon remained standing, silent, as insults washed over them like water. Finally, Velmora's voice boomed through the chamber, enhanced to a volume that made the crystal walls vibrate. Enough! Silence fell immediately. The algorithm is not flawed, Velmora said, her tone cold. It has served the Council for 10,000 years. Every species selected has proven their worth in defense of galactic civilization. The decision stands. She turned her gaze to the human section. Ambassador Park, does Earth accept its obligation under the treaty? All eyes in the chamber focused on Minji. She was a small woman by human standards, barely over 5 feet tall, with gray streaking her black hair. She had spent 20 years building Earth's reputation on the Council, fighting for recognition and respect. Now that work seemed meaningless, but Minji's voice was steady when she spoke. Earth accepts. The chamber erupted again, but this time with disbelief rather than laughter. Several delegates tried to speak over each other, protesting the decision. Minji continued, raising her voice slightly. However, I must ask the Council for clarification. What level of mobilization is expected? What resources will be provided? And what is the deployment timeline? Velmora consulted a holographic display. Each species must deploy 30% of their available military forces within 30 standard days. Support vessels and logistics will be provided by the Council. Humans will be assigned to Sector 7, supporting crash ground operations. Supporting. Not leading. Not even fighting independently. Jihoon's hands clenched into fists behind his back. The Torvin delegate spoke again, his tone now pitying rather than mocking. Ambassador, perhaps it would be wiser to request an exemption. The coming war will be brutal. Your species is not prepared for the scale of violence the Vryn bring. There is no shame in acknowledging this. For the first time, Minji's calm exterior cracked slightly. Not with fear or doubt, but with something harder. Counselor, Earth's history may be violent, but that violence taught us lessons. We know what it means to fight for survival. We know what it costs. And we know that running from responsibility only delays the inevitable. She paused, looking around the chamber. 50 years ago, when Earth applied for Council membership, we were told we were too young, too divided, too prone to conflict. We were told to wait another century, maybe 2. But you needed our mineral-rich asteroids and our strategic location. So you accepted us anyway, thinking we would be grateful and quiet. The chamber was silent now, the mockery replaced by uncomfortable attention. Now you need us again, Minji continued. Not because you respect us, but because an algorithm chose us. You laugh because you think we're weak. You may be right. But Earth has never refused a call to stand beside others, even those who look down on us. So yes, we accept. And in 30 days, you will see what humans can do when we decide to fight. She sat down, and Jihoon followed. Around them, the chamber remained unusually quiet. Velmora cleared her throat. The conscription is confirmed. All selected species will receive detailed briefings within 6 hours. This session is adjourned. As the delegates began to file out, still muttering among themselves, Jihoon leaned close to Minji. Do we actually have 30% of our fleet ready to deploy? Minji's expression didn't change. We have 20% ready. The rest will be ready in 3 weeks. That's cutting it close. We're humans, Commander. We work best under pressure. She stood, straightening her jacket. Contact General Choi. Tell her to begin full mobilization. Tell her we have something to prove. As they left the chamber, neither noticed the few delegates who had remained silent during the mockery. These older species, who had seen civilizations rise and fall, watched the humans depart with thoughtful expressions. They had noticed something in Ambassador Park's words. Something in the way she and her commander had endured the mockery without breaking. They had seen that look before, in species that went on to reshape the galaxy. It was the look of those who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. General Haijin Choi stood on the observation deck of Pacific Command, watching the sunrise paint the ocean in shades of gold and red. Behind her, the command center hummed with activity as officers coordinated the largest military mobilization in human history. Screens displayed feeds from every continent, every military installation, every shipyard orbiting Earth and its colonies. In 72 hours, everything had changed. The message from the Galactic Council had arrived 3 days ago, and within an hour, every government on Earth had set aside their differences. The old tensions between nations seemed childish now, faced with the reality of alien war. Humanity had spent 2 centuries learning to work together after nearly destroying itself. Now that lesson would be tested. Haijin turned from the window as Captain Daeho Lee entered the command center. The man was 35, young for a starship commander, but he had earned his position through skill and instinct. His uniform was already marked with the insignia of the 1st Expeditionary Fleet, the vanguard force that would deploy first. "General," Daeho saluted, "the Incheon is fully armed and ready. Engineering estimates we can launch in 6 days, ahead of schedule." "Good. What about the civilian conversions?" Daeho pulled up a holographic display. 70 commercial vessels have been retrofitted with military-grade weapons and shields. The shipyard workers are calling it the Merchant Marine Fleet. They're not as fast as our warships, but they can fight. Haijin nodded. When the Council had reviewed Earth's military assets, they had counted only the dedicated warships. They hadn't considered humanity's massive commercial fleet, centuries of experience in rapid manufacturing, or the willingness to convert anything that could fly into a weapon. It was the kind of adaptive thinking that came from a species that had clawed its way up from tribal warfare to spaceflight in just 10,000 years, across the planet. The mobilization continued at a pace that shocked the alien observers stationed on Earth. In Seoul, factory workers who had been making consumer electronics retooled their production lines for military components. In Sao Paulo, retired veterans lined up at recruitment centers, their age meaningless in the face of duty. In Lagos, engineers worked 30-hour shifts to upgrade defense satellites. In Moscow, programmers wrote new combat algorithms based on centuries of military doctrine. Lieutenant Yuna Kang walked through the tactical operations room, reviewing deployment strategies. She was 26, fresh from the academy, and had been promoted twice in 3 days simply because command needed every capable officer. Her specialty was asymmetric warfare, a concept most galactic species didn't understand. They fought according to rigid doctrines and honor codes. Humans fought to win by any means necessary. "Ma'am," one of her analysts called out, "we're getting footage from the Kresh deployment. You need to see this." The screen showed the Kresh War fleet assembling in orbit around their homeworld. Massive battleships, each one designed for head-on confrontation, painted in honor markings that dated back millennia. They were magnificent and terrifying, exactly what you'd expect from a warrior species. The analyst switched to another feed showing the Mindari fleet. Sleek vessels that moved in perfect synchronization, their telepathic crews operating as one mind. Then the screen showed Earth's assembling fleet, and Yuna understood why the analyst had called her over. The alien observers were broadcasting their commentary, and the translations were brutal. "The human vessels are crude," one observer noted. "They lack the elegance of established military powers. Many appear to be commercial vessels with weapons attached. Their organization seems chaotic." Another observer added, "Intelligence reports suggest humans are deploying medical personnel at a 2-to-1 ratio compared to standard military doctrine. They also carry extensive repair facilities. This suggests they expect heavy casualties and damage." What the observers didn't understand was that humans didn't expect casualties. They planned for them. Every human military officer had studied history, had seen the cost of being unprepared. They knew that war wasn't glorious. It was bloody, brutal, and survival often came down to who could repair their ships fastest and keep their soldiers alive longest. Engineer Sun Ho-beek barely slept anymore. His team at the Lunar Military Research Facility had been given an impossible task: develop new weapons technologies in 3 weeks. Technologies that could compete with civilizations that had been fighting for millions of years. It should have been impossible, But somehow understood something the galaxy didn't. Humans were terrifyingly good at making things that killed other things. His team had analyzed every piece of alien technology they could access, every weapon design, every tactical doctrine. Then they had thrown out most of it and returned to human principles. The galaxy fought with directed energy weapons and elegant missile systems. Humans added kinetic kill vehicles, electronic warfare systems that could blind enemy sensors, and what Sun Ho called unpleasant surprises that he refused to explain even to the general. "We're not trying to match them," he explained to his exhausted team. "We're trying to confuse them, make them fight our way instead of theirs." On the 15th day, protests erupted across Earth, not against the war, but from people demanding to volunteer who were being turned away. The military couldn't process applications fast enough. Millions wanted to serve. The galaxy watched this phenomenon with confusion. Most civilized species conscripted their military forces from those who had no other options. Humans were volunteering in numbers that overwhelmed the system. Ambassador Minji Park addressed the planet from Geneva, her image broadcast to every screen on Earth and its colonies. "I know you're afraid," she said. "I know this seems impossible. 50 years ago, we were alone in the universe. Now we're being asked to fight in a war we didn't start, alongside species that mock us, against an enemy we don't understand." She paused, and her expression hardened. "But this is who we are. This is what we do. We stand up when others fall down. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. Not because we're stronger or smarter or more advanced, but because we remember what it's like to be vulnerable. We remember what it's like to face extinction." Her words resonated across the planet. In the streets of Tokyo, crowds gathered around public screens in respectful silence. In New York, families held each other tighter. In Mumbai, temples filled with prayers for those deploying to the stars. On the 23rd day, the first expeditionary fleet launched from Earth orbit. Captain Daeho Lee sat in the command chair of the Incheon, watching his homeworld shrink in the view screen. Around him, 300 ships of various sizes and purposes formed up into battle groups. They didn't look like the neat, organized fleets of other species. They looked like what they were: a hastily assembled force of military vessels, converted merchant ships, and anything else that could mount a weapon. Lieutenant Yuna Kang stood at the tactical station, her screens showing the deployment vectors. "Captain, we're receiving final clearance from Pacific Command. All ships report ready for hyperspace jump." Daeho opened a channel to the fleet. "This is Captain Lee to all vessels. In a few moments, we jump to the Calver system, where we'll join the Kresh and Mandari forces. The galaxy thinks we're weak. They think we're primitives playing at war. Maybe they're right. But we're going to show them what humans can do when we're fighting for more than just ourselves. We're fighting for every species that thinks they're too weak to matter. Every civilization that's been dismissed or ignored. We're fighting to prove that strength isn't about how old you are or how big your ships are. It's about refusing to quit even when everyone expects you to fail." He paused, looking around the bridge at his young crew. Most of them had never seen combat. In a few days, everything would change for them. Engage hyperspace drives. Let's go to war. 300 ships vanished in flashes of light, beginning their journey to a battle none of them were truly prepared for. Behind them, Earth continued its mobilization. The second and third fleets were already forming. Factories ran day and night. Volunteers continued to flood recruitment centers. High above Earth, in a luxury observation station, the alien observers compiled their reports for the Galactic Council. Most of their assessments were negative. The human fleet was disorganized, their tactics untested, their crews inexperienced. The observers predicted significant casualties in the first engagement, possibly a complete rout. Some suggested evacuation plans for human colonies in case the species collapsed entirely under the pressure of real warfare. Only one observer, an ancient being who had witnessed the rise and fall of 100 civilizations, wrote a different report. The humans mobilize with a speed and efficiency that suggests preparation for this moment. They do not fight with honor codes or ancient traditions. They fight with adaptability and ruthlessness. Recommend close monitoring. Previous species with similar characteristics have dramatically altered galactic power structures. His report was filed with the others and mostly ignored. After all, what could humans possibly do that would surprise the galaxy? They were about to find out. The Calver system burned. 3 planets smoldered under orbital bombardment while ships fought and died in the space between them. Captain Daeho Lee watched the tactical display with growing concern as his fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the battle zone. The Krashen Mindari had arrived 2 days earlier and were locked in brutal combat with the Vryn invasion force. Tactical analysis, Daeho ordered. His voice calm despite the chaos on screen. Lieutenant Yuna Kang worked at console, her young face illuminated by the glow of data streams. The Kresh are holding the line at the 3rd planet, but they're taking heavy losses. The Mindari fleet is conducting hit-and-run attacks on Vryn supply lines, but the enemy keeps bringing in reinforcements. Current estimate puts Vryn forces at 3 times our combined strength. On the view screen, a Kresh battleship exploded under concentrated fire from 5 Vryn dreadnoughts. The Kresh fought with honor, charging straight at their enemies, weapons blazing. It was magnificent and suicidal. The Vryn knew exactly how to counter such predictable tactics. "Open a channel to Kresh Commander Goroth," Daeho said. The screen shifted to show a scarred warrior, his battle armor cracked and stained. Behind him, fires burned on his bridge. "Human," Goroth growled. "If you have come to die alongside us, form up on our left flank. We push forward in 6 minutes. Commander, with respect, that's suicide. They're baiting you into a kill zone." Goroth's eyes narrowed. "We are Kresh. We do not hide or scheme. We fight with honor, face to face with our enemies. If you lack the courage for this, stay back and watch warriors die." The channel closed. Yuna looked at her captain, waiting. Around them, the bridge crew tensed. They had trained for months, run countless simulations, but this was real. Ships were dying out there. People were dying. Daeho studied the tactical display for a long moment. The Vryn fleet was positioned perfectly to annihilate the Kresh charge. Their war master, a commander named Krellis, clearly understood Kresh psychology and was using their honor against them. But the Vryn had never fought humans before. "New plan," Daeho said. "Split the fleet into 3 groups. Group 1 stays here and makes as much noise as possible. Light up every sensor, broadcast on every frequency. Make them think we're the main force. Group 2 circles wide around the battle and positions behind the Vryn supply vessels. Group 3 comes with me. We're going to do something the Vryn won't expect." "What's that, sir?" Yuna asked. "We're going to cheat." The human fleet split apart, moving in patterns that confused the Vryn sensors. Unlike the rigid formations of the Kresh or the synchronized movements of the Mindari, human ships moved independently, each captain making their own tactical decisions within the overall strategy. It looked like chaos. That was intentional. Aboard the Vryn flagship, War Master Krellis observed the human arrival with amusement. His species had conquered 40 systems in the last month. These primitives with their small fleet would barely qualify as a warm-up exercise. He had read the intelligence reports. Humans were emotional, disorganized, and technologically inferior. They would break easily. "The humans are splitting their forces," his tactical officer reported. "Their movements are erratic." Fear and inexperience, Krellis decided. Ignore them. Focus on destroying the Kresh. Once their warriors are dead, the telepaths and humans will surrender. It was the last decision he would make as War Master. Group 1 human ships appeared on the Vrin sensors like a full invasion force, broadcasting false signals and deploying decoy drones that mimicked ship signatures. The Vrin assigned 20 vessels to intercept them, more than enough to handle what they thought was the entire human fleet. They were wrong. Group 2 emerged behind the Vrin supply line, and suddenly human tactics became clear. They didn't target the military vessels. They targeted the ammunition ships, the fuel depots, the repair stations. Without warning, without the formal challenge that galactic warfare protocols required, they simply started shooting. Supply ships exploded across the battle space. Vrin military vessels suddenly found themselves cut off from reinforcement and resupply. It was considered unsporting by galactic standards, attacking non-combat vessels. Humans didn't care about sporting. Commander Taijin Song led the Group 3 assault. His specialty was boarding operations, a form of combat most spacefaring species had abandoned as too risky and brutal. His Marines were loaded into small, fast assault shuttles that looked like debris until they were right on top of their targets. "All teams, remember your training," Taijin said over the comm. "Fast, brutal, overwhelming. Don't give them time to respond. These ships are built for space combat, not internal security. Use that." The assault shuttles screamed through the battle space, dodging fire that was meant for larger vessels. They attached to Vrin warships like parasites, cutting through hull plating with plasma torches. Marines poured into the ships, and what followed would later be analyzed by military historians across the galaxy as a perfect example of how humans fought. When they stopped playing by the rules, the Vrin were larger than humans, stronger, better armed. But they had never fought an enemy that used grenades in their own ships. That would sacrifice structural integrity for tactical advantage. That fought with a viciousness born from 10,000 years of killing their own species. The Marines moved through the ships like a plague, targeting bridges, engineering sections, and weapon controls. On the Inchin, Deho watched as 3 Vrin cruisers went dark, their crews overwhelmed by boarding parties. "Now," he ordered, "all ships, full attack. Target the confused vessels first." The human fleet dropped their electronic warfare screens and struck. They used tactics the galaxy had forgotten or never known. Ships performed impossible maneuvers, their human pilots pushing engines to the breaking point. They fired missiles that split into submunitions at the last second. They used their own damaged vessels as weapons, piloting them on collision courses with enemy ships. The Kresh charge began, and the Vrin formation that should have destroyed them suddenly found itself fighting on 3 fronts. The careful kill zone became a chaotic melee. Krellis tried to adapt, but his doctrine had no answer for enemies who refused to fight predictably. "They're ramming us," a Vrin officer screamed. The human vessel Dajin just crashed into our destroyer. Krellis watched in disbelief as a badly damaged human ship, its crew already evacuated, was piloted by remote control into a Vrin vessel twice its size. Both ships exploded, but the human crew was already safe aboard another vessel. They had sacrificed their ship without losing a single person. What kind of savages fight like this? Krellis demanded. His tactical officer looked up from his console, his expression showing something Vrin rarely felt: fear. "War Master, we're being boarded on 12 ships. Our supply line is destroyed. The humans are targeting our communications relays. We can't coordinate our fleet." Taijin Song breached the bridge of a Vrin battleship, his Marines moving with lethal efficiency. The Vrin defenders fought hard, but they weren't prepared for humans who treated their own safety as secondary to mission completion. Taijin took a plasma bolt to his shoulder and kept advancing, putting 3 rounds into the ship's captain before dragging himself to the command console. "Inchin, this is Song. Package delivered. You have control of their flagship." On the Inchin, human cyber warfare specialists hacked into the captured ship's systems. Within minutes, they were broadcasting false orders to the Vryn fleet, contradicting commands from Krellis, adding to the confusion. The battle lasted 6 more hours. By the end, the Vryn had retreated in disorder, leaving behind wreckage and wondering what had just happened. The crash had survived because humans had refused to let them die. The Mindari had helped where they could, but even their telepathic coordination couldn't match the sheer unpredictable chaos of human warfare. Commander, Goratha's ship docked with the Inchin 2 hours after the battle. The crash warrior was covered in wounds, but alive. He found Deho on the bridge, overseeing repairs while casualty reports came in. The humans had lost 47 ships and over 3,000 crew members. It was devastating. It was also far less than anyone had predicted. "You did not fight with honor," Gorath said bluntly. Deho turned to face him, exhaustion evident in his eyes. "No, we didn't. We fought to win. We fought to make sure you and your warriors could keep fighting with your honor intact. We fought to protect those supply ships the Mindari were guarding. We fought because if we had followed the rules, we'd all be dead right now." Gorath was silent for a long moment. Then he placed a massive hand on Deho's shoulder, the Kresh gesture of respect between warriors. "You humans are strange. You claim to be weak, yet you fight like demons. You have no honor codes, yet you protected us when you could have run. I do not understand your species. We don't understand ourselves half the time," Deho admitted. "But we're still here. That's what matters." Across the galaxy, military analysts watched recordings of the battle with growing concern. The humans had won, but not in any way that existing doctrine could explain. They broke rules that had governed warfare for millennia. They used tactics that were considered taboo or impossible. They had taken horrific casualties and called it a victory. 6 months into the war, Dr. Soman Han no longer remembered what peace felt like. The field hospital on Fortress Station Delta operated around the clock, treating casualties from all 3 allied species. She moved between beds with practiced efficiency, her surgical scrubs stained with blood in 3 different colors: human red, Kresh black, Mindari blue. After a while, it all looked the same. A new wave of wounded arrived from the front lines. Marines from Commander Taijin Song's unit, fresh from another boarding action. Soman directed her staff with hand signals, triaging the worst cases first. One young Marine, Private Jinho Kwan, had burns across 60% of his body. He should have been dead. Somehow he was still conscious. "Doctor," he whispered through cracked lips. "Did we hold the line?" "You held it," Soman said, injecting him with pain medication. "Now be quiet and let me work." She spent 3 hours in surgery, replacing burned tissue with synthetic skin grafts, repairing internal damage that would have killed him in minutes without intervention. When she finally stepped out of the operating theater, she found 5 more critical cases waiting. There was no time to rest. There was never time to rest. In the station's briefing room, Commander Ji-Hoon Kim studied casualty reports with growing dread. In 6 months of fighting, humanity had lost 30% of its deployed forces. The numbers were staggering. 15,000 dead, 20,000 wounded, hundreds of ships destroyed or damaged beyond repair. And yet, somehow, they were winning. The Vryn had expected human morale to break after the first major losses. Instead, it had hardened. Every time the enemy pushed, humans pushed back harder. Every defeat became a rallying cry. The names of destroyed ships were painted on new ones. The dead were honored not with silence, But with determination to make their sacrifice matter. Captain Seo Nam walked into the briefing room, her flight suit showing the wear of constant combat. She had become an ace pilot through tactics that made her instructors back on Earth shake their heads in disbelief. She flew her fighter like it was an extension of her body, pulling maneuvers that should have killed her but somehow never did. "Commander," she saluted. "New orders?" Ji-hoon pulled up a star map. "The Vrin are changing tactics. They're targeting civilian populations now, trying to break our will to fight. Intelligence suggests they're planning a major attack on one of our colony worlds." Seal's expression darkened. "Which one?" "We don't know yet, but I need your squadron ready to deploy within 6 hours. We're forming a rapid response fleet." "Understood, sir." She hesitated. "Commander, my pilots are exhausted. We've flown 18 missions in the last 3 weeks. Some of them are holding their fighters together through willpower alone." Ji-hoon met her eyes. "I know, but if we don't stop this attack, thousands of civilians will die. Maybe millions. Can your people fly?" "Yes, sir. We always can." That was the truth that terrified their enemies. Humans didn't fight until they couldn't anymore. They fought past that point, past exhaustion, into a place where only determination mattered. Other species had breaking points. Humans seemed to have none. Private Jin-ho Kwan woke up in the recovery ward, his body wrapped in bandages and medical sensors. Through the window, he could see Earth in the distance, the blue planet that seemed impossibly peaceful from up here. He tried to remember the last time he had been home, but the memories felt like they belonged to someone else. A nurse checked his vitals, then moved on to the next patient. Across from him, a Kresh warrior lay recovering from chest wounds. The alien had been brought in from the same battle, fighting alongside human Marines. Despite their differences, they had bled together. Jin-ho closed his eyes and saw the faces of his squad. 7 people he had trained with, fought with, trusted with his life. 4 of them were dead now. He had watched them die, watched them give everything to hold a position that most species would have abandoned. Why? What made humans keep fighting when any reasonable species would retreat? Dr. Soman found him awake during her rounds. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got burned alive and then put back together," Jin-ho said, attempting a smile. "But I felt worse." Soman pulled up his medical chart, reviewing the data. "You're healing faster than expected. You should be ready to return to light duty in 3 weeks." 3 weeks? Jin-ho tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. "Doc, my unit is out there. I need to get back to them." "Your unit is on mandatory rest rotation," Soman said firmly. "And even if they weren't, you're in no condition to fight. You need time to heal, Private." Jin-ho fell silent, staring at the ceiling. Then, quietly, he said, "They killed my family, you know? The Vrin, during that first raid on Kepler Colony. My parents, my sister, everyone. I wasn't even there. I was at basic training, learning how to fight. And then I got the message." Soman had heard variations of this story dozens of times. The Vrin attacks on civilian targets had created a generation of soldiers who fought not for glory or honor, but for revenge and protection. It made them dangerous. It also made them vulnerable. "Is that why you fight?" she asked. "Revenge?" Jin-ho thought about it. "At first, yeah. I wanted to make them pay. But then I met my squad, and I started fighting to keep them alive. And then I met the Kresh and Mindari, and I realized we were fighting to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Now I fight because if I don't, someone else will have to. And maybe they'll lose their family too." Soman nodded slowly. That was humanity's real strength and its greatest curse. They fought not because they enjoyed it, but because someone had to. And they couldn't stand the thought of anyone else bearing that burden. Across the war front, Other human forces were discovering the cost of pushing themselves beyond normal limits. Captain Iselnam led her squadron through an asteroid field, pursuing Vryn fighters that were harassing supply convoys. Her instruments showed damage warnings across multiple systems, but she ignored them. The mission mattered more than her survival. Dragon Lead, this is Dragon 3, her wingman called. I'm losing power to my engines. I need to break off. -3. Stay with the formation. We're almost on them. Lead, I can't maintain speed. Isiel made a split-second decision. All dragons except 3, with me. 3. Fall back and cover our exit. She cut her fighter into a tight turn, pushing the engines past their safe limits. Behind her, 4 pilots followed, trusting her instincts even when their instruments screamed warnings. They caught the Vryn fighters by surprise, coming out of the asteroid field at an angle the enemy didn't expect. The battle was brief and brutal. 2 Vryn fighters destroyed, 1 human fighter damaged but operational. They had saved the convoy, but as Isiel guided her wounded squadron back to base, she felt the exhaustion in her bones. How much longer could they keep this pace? How many more battles before they simply couldn't fly anymore? The answer came sooner than expected. A week later, Vryn forces launched a massive assault on New Horizon, one of humanity's largest colony worlds. 3 million people lived there, including families of deployed soldiers. The attack came without warning, bypassing defensive fleets through a tactic the Vryn had clearly learned from humans. Deception. Commander Ji-Hoon Kim watched the attack unfold from Delta Station, feeling helpless. The response fleet was too far away. By the time they arrived, the damage would be catastrophic. Unless someone did something desperate, Commander Taijin Song was closer. His Marines were aboard a supply ship, heading back to base after a month of continuous combat operations. When the call came, requesting any forces in range to assist New Horizon, Taijin didn't hesitate. "Change course," he ordered the ship's captain. "Maximum speed to New Horizon." "Commander, we're a supply ship. We have no weapons, no shields. We have 300 exhausted Marines against a Vryn assault fleet. Then we'll make do with what we have. Change course." The supply ship Harmony arrived at New Horizon 12 hours into the attack. The colony's orbital defenses were already destroyed. Vryn troop transports were landing on the surface, beginning an invasion. Taijin's 300 Marines faced an enemy force of over 5,000. They deployed anyway. What followed would be taught in military academies for generations. 300 human Marines, using captured Vryn weapons, jury-rigged explosives, and pure determination, held off an invasion force 50 times their size for 18 hours. They didn't have artillery or air support. They had each other and the absolute refusal to let civilians die. Private Jinho Kwan, who had left the hospital against medical advice to join the fight, held a choke point in the colony's main street for 6 hours. When his weapon ran out of ammunition, he used Vryn weapons. When those ran out, he used explosives. When the explosives were gone, he used pieces of debris and his own armored fists. By the time the response fleet arrived, New Horizon was scarred but standing. The Vryn had retreated, unable to comprehend soldiers who would fight past the point of death. Of Taijin's 300 Marines, only 93 were still combat capable. 57 were dead. The rest were wounded so badly they might never fight again. Commander Taijin Song stood in the ruins of a street he had defended, looking at the survivors. They had saved 3 million lives. They had proven that even when outnumbered, outgunned, and exhausted beyond reason, humans would not break. UDE. The Vryn War ended not with a grand battle, but with a simple transmission. After 2 years of grinding conflict, the Vryn High Command sent an unconditional surrender to the Galactic Council. The message was brief: devoid of the formal language that usually accompanied such historic moments. It simply stated that the Vryn Empire acknowledged defeat and requested terms for peace. Ambassador Minji Park stood in the council chambers once again, but this time the atmosphere was different. The delegates who had mocked humanity 24 months ago now watched her with something approaching fear. The human section was larger now, expanded to accommodate the military advisors and diplomatic staff that Earth's new status required. High Arbiter Velmora called the session to order, her voice lacking its usual confidence. The council recognizes Ambassador Park of Earth. Minji approached the central platform, her steps measured and calm. She had aged visibly during the war, gray now dominating her black hair, lines deepening around her eyes. But her voice remained steady. The Vryn have surrendered. After 2 years of war, the fighting is over. Earth acknowledges this surrender and supports the Council's peace negotiations. A Torvin delegate stood, his forearms gesturing nervously. Ambassador, the Council wishes to discuss the conduct of human forces during the war. There have been concerns about methods employed, tactics used, the disregard for established protocols of civilized warfare. Minji's expression didn't change. We fought to win. We fought to protect not just ourselves, but every species that the Vryn threatened. If our methods offended your sensibilities, I apologize. But I will not apologize for keeping my people and your people alive. Another delegate spoke up. A crystalline being from a species that had lost minimal forces during the war, thanks to human protection of their colonies. Ambassador, no one questions the effectiveness of human tactics. But we must address the precedent being set. If all species adopt human warfare methods, the galaxy will descend into barbarism. General Hai-Jin Choi stood from the human section, her uniform bearing decorations from a dozen battles. With respect, Counselor, barbarism is not defined by the tactics used. It's defined by the cause fought for. We didn't start this war. We didn't attack civilian populations until the Vryn did first. We followed the rules until following the rules meant letting innocent people die. You asked us to fight, and we fought the only way we knew how to win. The chamber fell silent. The truth was uncomfortable but undeniable. Human forces had suffered the highest casualty rate of any species in the war. 40% of their deployed forces were dead or permanently disabled. Yet they had never retreated, never surrendered, never stopped fighting. Their determination had held the line when the Kresh charge faltered, when the Mindari coordination broke down, when every reasonable military assessment said defeat was inevitable. Captain Daeho Lee sat in his quarters aboard the Incheon, now flagship of Earth's Third Fleet. The ship bore scars from 100 battles, patched and repaired so many times that little of the original structure remained. He was reading reports from the front lines, from commanders who had fought beside him for 2 years. Commander Taijin Song was in a rehabilitation facility on Earth, learning to walk again after his legs had been crushed during the defense of New Horizon. Private Jinho Kwan had been promoted to sergeant and was training new recruits, passing on lessons learned in blood. Dr. Soman Han had returned to civilian medicine, unable to continue treating combat casualties without breaking down. Captain Isil Nam was dead, killed in the war's final month when her fighter had sacrificed itself to stop a Vryn missile aimed at a hospital ship. The cost had been immeasurable. But they had won. A chime at his door pulled Daeho from his thoughts. Lieutenant Yuna Kang entered, now promoted to commander. She carried a datapad with the final casualty statistics. Captain, the official numbers are in. Total human casualties: 62,000 dead, 90,000 wounded, 473 ships lost. Economic cost estimated at 3 trillion credits. Daeho accepted the pad, reading through numbers that represented individual lives, families destroyed, futures erased. And the other species? Crash losses, 40,000. Mindari losses, 15,000. They both fielded larger forces initially, but their casualty rates were lower, because we protected them. Yes, sir. Deho set the pad down. Make sure every name is recorded. Every ship, every battle, every act of courage. Our people need to know what was sacrificed. The galaxy needs to know what it cost us to save them. In the Vryn capital, their new leadership struggled to explain their defeat to a population that had been raised on stories of military superiority. How had they lost to a species that was technologically inferior, numerically smaller, and only 50 years removed from their own planet? A Vryn military analyst named Kelroth compiled a report that would later become required reading at the Vryn War Academy. The humans did not defeat us through superior firepower or advanced technology, he wrote. They defeated us through an understanding of warfare that we had forgotten. They fought not as warriors seeking glory, but as survivors fighting extinction. Every battle was treated as if losing meant the death of their species. This gave them a psychological advantage we could not overcome. Furthermore, humans possess an adaptability that our rigid doctrine could not counter. They studied our tactics and changed this constantly. They used psychological warfare, deception, and strategies that violated our understanding of honorable combat. Most critically, they were willing to sacrifice themselves in ways that our soldiers could not comprehend. A Vryn warrior fights for honor and glory. A human soldier fights because someone has to, and they refuse to let anyone else bear that burden. The report concluded with a warning. If the galaxy ever faces the humans as enemies rather than allies, we will need to fundamentally rethink everything we know about warfare. Because they do not fight wars. They fight for survival. And a species that has survived as long as they have knows things about survival that we can barely imagine. 3 months after the surrender, the Galactic Council convened to formalize the peace treaty and recognize changes in galactic power structures. Ambassador Minji Park stood once more at the central platform, but this time she was not alone. Beside her stood representatives from 50 species who had fought in the war, including Kresh, Mindari, and even reformed Vryn delegates. High Arbiter Velmora addressed the chamber, her voice carrying the weight of acknowledgement. The Council recognizes the contributions of all species who defended galactic civilization during the Vryn War. Special recognition is given to Earth, whose forces held the line when defeat seemed certain, whose tactics revolutionized modern warfare, and whose soldiers paid the highest price for our collective security. She paused, and for the first time since Minji had known her, the avian leader seemed humbled. 2 years ago, when Earth was selected for conscription, this chamber laughed. We mocked humanity as primitives unworthy of standing beside established military powers. We were wrong. Not just wrong, but catastrophically blind to what we were choosing. Velmora turned to face Minji directly. Earth did not just fulfill its obligation under the treaty. Earth exceeded every expectation, redefined what it means to be a warrior species, and saved countless lives through sacrifice and determination. The Council formally apologizes for our dismissal of humanity and recognizes Earth as a permanent member of the Galactic Security Council. The chamber erupted in applause, but Minji felt no triumph. She thought of the 62,000 names on the memorial being built on Earth. She thought of families who would never see their loved ones again. She thought of Captain Isil Nam dying in the black of space, of Commander Taijin Song learning to walk again, of young soldiers like Sergeant Jinho Quan who would carry the scars of war forever. When the applause died down, Minji spoke. The Council's recognition is appreciated, but Earth did not fight for recognition or status. We fought because we were asked to, because lives were at stake, because someone had to stand up. The true honor belongs to those who gave everything and will never stand in this chamber to receive your applause." She gestured to the viewing screens that showed the memorial on Earth. A simple black wall with 62,000 names carved in stone. These are the ones who deserve your recognition. These are the ones who redefined warfare not because they wanted to, but because they refused to let others die. Remember their names. Remember what they sacrificed. And remember that strength is not about how powerful you are, but about how much you're willing to give to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The chamber fell silent, the weight of those words settling over delegates who had never experienced the cost of war. First Stand. Commander Ji-Hoon Kim stood in his military dress uniform, medals covering his chest. He had been promoted to admiral and given command of Earth's entire military presence in the Galactic Fleet. It was an honor he had never wanted. He addressed the council with the bluntness that had defined human military communication throughout the war. The council has asked Earth to train other species in our combat doctrines. We have agreed with conditions. We will teach you how to fight the way humans fight. We will show you the tactics that won this war.